I never thought a $20 toy would be the thing that destroyed my world. But as I stand here in the suffocating silence of this empty house, those plastic, unblinking eyes are the only ones that saw the truth. It's funny how life works. You spend years building a fortress, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, only to realize you were actually building a stage for someone else's performance. My name is Elias, and for a long time, I believed I was the luckiest man in Ohio. I had the career, the suburban dream, with the wraparound porch, and most importantly, I had Juliana. Have you ever looked at the person sleeping next to you and realized you're living with a complete stranger? I want you to really think about that. How well do you actually know the person who shares your bed? Before we go any deeper into this nightmare, I need to know, where are you watching this from? Drop a comment below. And if you've ever felt that cold, sharp knot in your stomach telling you something was wrong even when everything looked perfect, subscribe and stay with me. You need to hear how this ended because the justice I found wasn't just for me, it was for my daughter. Our life was a masterpiece of suburban fiction. Juliana was the ideal mom in our neighborhood. Her social media was a curated gallery of organic school lunches, handcrafted Halloween costumes, and perfectly timed photos of our 5-year-old daughter Alara reading by the fireplace. She had this way of smiling bright-wide and practice that made everyone feel like we were the gold standard of happiness. I worked as a senior logistics manager for a major shipping firm. It meant 50-hour weeks, endless spreadsheets, and late-night calls to overseas ports. It was exhausting, but I did it for them. Every overtime hour was another deposit into Alara's college fund or another renovation for Juliana's dream kitchen. I lived for the moments I walked through that front door. The smell of cinnamon or roasted chicken would hit me, and I'd see Juliana kneeling on the rug helping Alara with her puzzles. It was peace, or at least, it felt like peace. Looking back, I realized that peace was just a carefully maintained silence. The first red flag wasn't a lipstick stain or a mysterious phone call. It was a shift in the atmosphere. Juliana started talking a lot about privacy and emotional boundaries. She told me that Alara was entering a sensitive developmental stage and that my habit of coming home early to surprise them was disruptive to the routine. "Elias, honey, you have to understand," she said one Tuesday evening, her voice like silk as she folded laundry. "When you just show up at 3 p.m. instead of 6 p.m., it overexcites her. She loses her focus for dinner and bedtime. It's better if you just stick to the schedule, for her sake." I felt a twinge of guilt. I was the dad who was gone all day. Who was I to question the woman who managed the household like a Swiss watch? I agreed. I stayed at the office longer. I sat in my car at the local park, killing time until the clock hit exactly 6 p.m., just so I wouldn't disrupt my daughter's life. But the house started feeling different when I finally did walk in. There was a lingering scent, not the woodsy, cedar-toned soap I used, but something heavy, expensive, and distinctly masculine. A spicy, citrusy cologne that stuck to the fibers of the velvet sofa. "Did someone come by today?" I asked one evening, sniffing the air near the entryway. Juliana didn't even look up from her iPad. "Just the UPS guy and the neighbor, Mrs. Gable. Why are you tracking my visitors now?" "Elias, that feels a little controlling, don't you think?" She said it with a light laugh, but her eyes remained cold, fixed on the screen. The gas lighting started so subtly, I didn't even recognize it as a weapon. Every time I noticed a misplaced glass, a chair moved an inch from its usual spot, or a smudge of mud on the foyer rug that didn't match our shoes, Juliana had an answer that made me feel like I was losing my mind. She'd sigh, pat my hand, and tell me I was working too hard. She'd mention how my paranoia was starting to worry her. I wanted to believe her. I desperately needed to believe that my life wasn't a lie. I'd look at Alara, my sweet, golden-haired girl, and tell myself that a woman who loved her child this much could never be a monster. But the gut doesn't lie. The gut is an ancient radar that picks up the vibrations of betrayal long before the brain can process the data. The air in our bedroom grew thick with unspoken things. Juliana began sleeping on the far edge of the king-sized bed, her back turned to me like a fortress wall. She claimed she had migraines or that she was touched out from a long day of mothering. I reached out to touch her shoulder once, and she flinched as if my hand were a hot iron. "Don't," she snapped before softening her voice a second later. I'm exhausted, Elias. Please, just let me sleep." I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan spinning endlessly, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. It was too steady, too controlled. She wasn't sleeping. She was waiting for me to fall asleep. The spicy scent of that cologne seemed to rise from the very floorboards, mocking me. One Saturday morning, I was cleaning out the garage when Alara ran out to find me. She was clutching her favorite stuffed animal, a worn-out, oversized teddy bear with one loose ear. I had bought it for her at a carnival when she was 3. "Daddy, look," she chirped, holding the bear up. "Mr. Buttons has a new friend today." I wiped the grease from my hands onto a rag. "Oh yeah, who's his new friend, Alara?" "The man with the loud car," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Mommy says it's a secret. We play hide and seek in your big closet when the sun is high. I have to stay in my room so I don't get found first." The world stopped spinning. The sound of the suburban morning, the birds, the distant lawnmowers, the wind in the oaks, all faded into a high-pitched ring in my ears. I looked toward the house. Juliana was standing at the kitchen window, a mug of coffee in her hand. She was watching us. When she saw me looking, she blew me a kiss and waved her ideal mom mask perfectly in place. I didn't scream. I didn't run inside and demand the truth. A strange, icy calm washed over me, the kind of calm a soldier feels when the first shot is fired. I realized then that I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a protector. I knelt down so I was eye level with my daughter, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "That sounds like a very important secret, Alara," I said, my voice remarkably steady. "Does Mr. Buttons like that game?" She shook her head, her little brow furrowing. "No. He gets lonely on the shelf. He wants to watch the living room so he can see when you come home." I hugged her tight, smelling the baby shampoo in her hair, and I made a silent vow. I wasn't going to let this woman destroy our daughter's world without a fight. I went back to the garage, but I didn't finish the shelves. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and began researching the most discreet, high-definition hidden cameras on the market. I found it on a specialty site for private investigators, a pinhole camera embedded in a high-quality replacement eye for a plush toy. It had night vision motion activation and a live cloud feed that I could access from my phone. It cost more than a month's groceries, but I didn't care. I ordered it with overnight shipping to a secure locker at a nearby pharmacy. The next day, while Juliana was at her weekly yoga brunch with her friends, I sat at the kitchen table with surgical precision. I took Alara's bear, the one she called Mr. Buttons, and carefully opened the seam behind its neck. I removed the old, dull plastic eye and replaced it with the lens. I tucked the tiny battery pack deep into the polyester stuffing and stitched him back up using a needle and thread I'd hidden in my toolbox. When I finished, I held the bear up. It looked exactly the same, but now it was a witness. I walked into the living room and placed Mr. Buttons on the high mantel, right next to a decorative vase. From that height, the camera had a wide-angle view of the front door, the entire seating area, and the hallway leading to our bedroom. It was the perfect vantage point for the theater of lies Juliana had been directing. That night dinner was a hollow affair. Juliana talked about a new preschool curriculum she was looking into. She was animated, charming, and utterly convincing. I sat across from her eating my pasta, watching the way her throat moved when she swallowed. I wondered how many lies she could fit in one mouth. "You're very quiet tonight, Elias," she said, tilting her head. "Is work stressing you out again?" "Just a lot of moving parts," I replied, forcing a smile. "Logistics. You know, everything has to be in the right place at the right time, or the whole system collapses." "Well, don't bring that stress home," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her skin was cold. "We need you present here. Elara misses you." I felt a surge of bile in the back of my throat. I wanted to pull my hand away to flip the table to show her the footage I hadn't even recorded yet. But I stayed still. I was playing the long game now. The following Thursday, I told Juliana I had an emergency shipment coming in from the West Coast and wouldn't be home until near midnight. I saw the briefest flicker of something in her eyes, not sadness, but a spark of opportunity. "Oh, that's a shame," she said, her voice dripping with fake disappointment. "I'll make sure Elara has a quiet night. Don't work too hard, honey." I left the house at 8 a.m. like usual. I went to the office and stared at my computer screen for hours doing absolutely nothing. My phone sat on the desk next to my mouse, a black mirror reflecting the fluorescent lights of the ceiling. At 1:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. A notification from the cloud app Motion detected in living room. My breath hitched. My fingers trembled as I swiped the screen and opened the feed. The image was crystal clear. The living room looked peaceful, bathed in the soft afternoon light, filtering through our expensive linen curtains. Then the front door opened. Juliana walked in. She wasn't wearing her mom clothes. She was in a deep red silk dress I'd never seen before, her hair down in loose, sultry waves. She looked beautiful. She looked like a stranger. She wasn't alone. A man followed her in. He was younger than me, with the kind of gym-honed physique and arrogant gait that screamed entitlement. He didn't look like a Mr. Julian. He looked like a predator. He closed the door behind him and immediately pulled Juliana into his arms. I watched in agonizing high definition as my wife, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had stood before God and promised to cherish, melted into this man's touch. They didn't go to the bedroom right away. They stood in the center of my living room, right in front of the mantel. Juliana laughed a sound I hadn't heard in months, a real guttural laugh of genuine pleasure. She reached out and traced the man's jawline. "Is the coast clear?" the man asked, his voice coming through the tiny microphone in the bear's ear. It was a deep, grating voice. "He's stuck at the office until midnight," Juliana whispered, leaning in to kiss his neck. "And the brat's iPadded out in her room with the white noise machine on max. We have ours. The brat. She called our daughter, our beautiful, innocent Elara, a brat." I felt something inside me break. It wasn't a clean snap. It was a slow, grinding fracture of my entire soul. I watched them move to the sofa I had paid for with 3 months of overtime. I watched them pour glasses from the bottle of vintage bourbon my father had given me for my 40th birthday. They sat there, feet up on the coffee table, mocking my existence. Juliana started telling him about my paranoia. He actually asked if someone had been here because of your cologne, she said, giggling as she took a sip of the bourbon. He's so pathetic, Keegan. He just sits there and takes whatever I tell him. I could tell him the sky is neon green, and he'd probably go get his eyes checked. The man Keegan smirked and leaned back, spreading his arms across the back of the couch. How much longer do we have to play this game, Jules? I'm tired of parking 3 blocks away and sneaking in through the back gate. Soon, she promised, her voice turning sharp and cold. The divorce papers are already drafted. My lawyer says if we play the absentee father card right, I'll get the house the full settlement and total custody. He's a logistics guy. He has the data, but he doesn't have the heart. I'll ruin him before he even realizes the war has started. I sat in my cubicle surrounded by the hum of a busy office and watched my execution being planned in real time. I wasn't just losing my wife, I was being hunted. She wasn't just leaving, she was planning to strip me of my home and my child. I watched them for another 10 minutes. I watched things I could never unsee. Every frame of the footage was a hot coal pressed against my skin. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I had to see it all. I had to document every second of her betrayal, every word of her malice. Finally, they stood up and headed toward the hallway, their shadows stretching long across the hardwood floor. Juliana paused for a second and looked directly toward the mantel. For a heartbeat, I thought she saw the lens. I thought the game was up. But she just reached up, adjusted the decorative vase next to Mr. Buttons, and smoothed the bear's fur with a mocking, gentle hand. She smiled at the toy, a cruel, triumphant curve of her lips, and then followed Keegan into the darkness of our bedroom. I closed the app. My hands were no longer shaking. They were cold, dead cold. I looked at the wedding ring on my finger, the gold band that felt like a shackle. I slowly twisted it off and laid it on the desk. I knew I couldn't go home yet. I couldn't face her while the fire was still this fresh. If I went home now, I might do something that would jeopardize my chance at saving Alara. I needed a plan. I needed a professional. I picked up my desk phone and dialed a number I'd saved earlier that morning. Rhodes and Associates. A woman's voice answered. I need to speak with Arthur Rhodes. I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from a different person. Tell him it's an emergency. Tell him I have the data. I spent the next 4 hours in a dimly lit office downtown watching the footage again with a man who had seen the worst of humanity. Arthur Rhodes didn't flinch. He just took notes, his pen scratching rhythmically against a yellow legal pad. This is gold, Elias Rhodes said, leaning back in his leather chair. It's brutal, it's painful, but it's exactly what we need. Especially the part about the absentee father strategy and her comments about your daughter. No judge in this state will give her primary custody after hearing her call the child a brat while entertaining a lover in the family home. What do I do now? I asked. You go home, Rhodes said, looking me dead in the eye. You walk through that door, you kiss her hello, you eat the dinner she makes, and you act like the same pathetic husband she thinks you are. You do not tip your hand. Not by a look, not by a word. We need her to stay confident. We need her to file those papers first. We need her to walk into that courtroom thinking she's already won. The drive home felt like a journey through a graveyard. Every familiar landmark, the grocery store where we bought Alara's birthday cake, the park where I taught her to ride a bike, felt tainted. I pulled into the driveway and saw Juliana's car parked neatly in the garage. The house was glowing with warm, inviting light. To anyone passing by, it looked like the ultimate American dream. I stepped out of the car and took a deep breath of the night air. It was crisp and smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of my house key. As I walked up the porch steps, the wood creaked under my weight, a familiar sound that usually brought comfort, but now sounded like a warning. I gripped the brass handle of the front door, my knuckles turning white, and felt the sudden, frantic thud of my heart against my ribs as I prepared to face the woman who was currently destroying my life from the inside out. I turned the key, the lock clicking open with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet night, and I pushed the door open to find Juliana standing in the foyer wearing her silk robe, a glass of wine in her hand, and a welcoming, predatory smile on her face. The wine in her glass caught the light swirling like a pool of rubies as she tilted it toward me. "Long day, honey." Alana's voice was like velvet, smooth and dangerously soft, masking the venom I now knew was hiding just beneath the surface. I stepped into the foyer, the air inside smelling of the lemon-scented floor wax she used to polish her perfect life, but beneath it, my senses were screaming, detecting that faint, lingering spice of Keegan's cologne. It was a ghost in the hallway, a silent testimony to the man who had been draped across my furniture only hours ago. I didn't flinch. I didn't let the heat behind my eyes spill over. Instead, I forced my muscles to relax, hanging my coat on the brass hook with the calculated precision of a man who had nothing to hide. I walked toward her and pressed a dry, ghost-like kiss to her cheek. She tasted like expensive Merlot and treachery. "Beyond long," I muttered, moving past her toward the kitchen. The West Coast shipment was a nightmare. Paperwork delays people who don't know how to do their jobs. You know how it is. "I do," she sighed, following me, her silk robe whispering against the hardwood. "But you're home now. That's all that matters. I kept some roast chicken warm for you, though it might be a bit dry by now." I sat at the island watching her back as she moved toward the oven. She looked so domestic, so devoted. If I hadn't seen the footage, if I hadn't heard her call our daughter a brat, I would have felt guilty for my coldness. Now every movement she made felt like a rehearsed scene in a play I was being forced to watch. I looked up at the mantel. Mr. Buttons sat there, his glass eye glinting in the dim light. He was the only honest thing in the room. The following weeks were a master class in psychological endurance. I became a ghost in my own house, a silent observer of a life that was rapidly being disassembled behind my back. I followed Lawyer Rhodes's advice to the letter. I was the pathetic husband. I complained about my back, I talked about mundane office politics, and I let Alana manage me. I watched her check her phone under the table, her thumb flying across the screen, likely telling Keegan how easy this was. But the hardest part wasn't the gaslighting. It wasn't even the knowledge that a stranger was invading my sanctuary while I earned the money that kept the lights on. It was Cora. My sweet 4-year-old girl started changing. She became quiet, withdrawn. She started carrying Mr. Buttons everywhere, clinging to the bear as if it were a life raft in a stormy sea. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed, she pulled me close, her small hands gripping my shirt. "Daddy," she whispered, her eyes wide and wet in the glow of her nightlight. "Yes, baby." "Is Mr. Buttons allowed to tell me if Mommy is angry?" My heart felt like it was being squeezed by a pair of iron pliers. Why would Mommy be angry? She yells when the man comes, she said, her lip trembling. She says I'm being too loud and that I have to stay in the closet with my iPad. It's dark in there, Daddy. Mr. Buttons stays with me, but he's scared too. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 to stop myself from sprinting into the living room and ending it all right then. The rage was a physical thing, a hot liquid lead pouring through my veins. I kissed her forehead, my voice thick with a promise I couldn't yet vocalize. Mr. Buttons is very brave, Cora, and so are you. Just a little longer, okay? Daddy is going to make sure the closet door stays open forever. I promise. I walked out of her room and saw Alana standing at the end of the hall, her arms crossed, a look of mild irritation on her face. You spend too much time coddling her, Emmett. You're going to make her soft. She needs to learn independence. She's for Alana, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion I was desperately trying to suppress. Exactly. Old enough to not need her father's hand held every night. Honestly, sometimes I think you use her as an excuse to avoid me. She rolled her eyes and turned back toward the master bedroom. The escalation was gradual, then sudden. Alana began dropping hints about our future. She started complaining about the house, the very house. She had picked out the one I had spent my weekends painting and repairing. She said it felt stagnant. She talked about how some people grow apart, and how it was better for children to see their parents happy and separate than miserable and together. She was laying the groundwork. She was building the narrative of a cold, distant husband and a vibrant, neglected wife who just wanted a fresh start. I checked the feed every day. The footage was getting bolder. Keegan was no longer just a visitor. He was an inhabitant. I watched him eat from my plates, use my razor, and sit in my office chair mocking my choice of books. But more importantly, I watched the way Alana treated Cora when I wasn't there. It wasn't physical abuse, but it was a cold, sharp neglect that was arguably worse. She treated our daughter like a piece of furniture that was in the way of her new life. One afternoon, I caught a conversation that made my blood run cold. They were in the kitchen, Alana leaning against the counter while Keegan scrolled through a tablet. "The filing is ready," Alana said, her voice sharp with excitement. "I'm citing irreconcilable differences and emotional abandonment. With the logs I've kept of his late nights and his unstable outbursts, which I've been very careful to document in my journal, the judge will hand me everything. He won't even get joint custody if I play the mental health card right." Keegan chuckled, reaching out to pull her closer. "And the house, sold as soon as the decree is final," she said. "We'll take the equity and move to the coast. He can have his logistics and his spreadsheets. We'll have his life." I didn't feel fear anymore. I didn't even feel sadness. I felt a cold, surgical clarity. They weren't just taking my family. They were planning to liquidate my entire existence and use the proceeds to fund their getaway. I called Rhodes from a burner phone during my lunch break. "She's moving. She mentioned a journal. She's fabricating outbursts I never had." "Let her," Rhodes replied, his voice a calm anchor in the chaos. "In fact, give her something to write about. Not a real outburst, nothing she can use against you, but be moody, be withdrawn. Let her think her plan is working. The more she thinks you're falling apart, the more careless she'll get." "Does the bear still have a clear view?" "Crystal," I said, "and the battery is holding." "Good. Because we're not just going for a divorce anymore, Emmett. We're going for a total dismantling. I want her to walk into that courthouse feeling like a queen, and I want her to leave with nothing but the clothes on her back. The days bled into each other, a blur of fake smiles and hidden cameras. I started acting the part she wanted. I'd sit in the living room and stare at the wall, refusing to engage in conversation. I'd leave the room when she entered. I was giving her the emotional abandonment she so desperately needed for her legal strategy. I watched her secretively film me on her phone during these moments, her face a mask of faux concern while her eyes gleamed with triumph. She didn't know that I was filming her too. The cliffhanger came on a rainy Thursday in late April. I came home to find the house eerily quiet. Cora wasn't in the living room. Alana wasn't in the kitchen. I walked up the stairs, my heart thumping a heavy rhythm against my ribs. I pushed open the door to our bedroom. Alana was standing by the window, her silhouette dark against the gray sky outside. She didn't turn around. On the bed lay a stack of legal documents, the bold letters at the top screaming at me. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The high-definition monitor mounted on the courtroom wall flickered, and suddenly the sterile oak-paneled room was filled with the vibrant colors of my own living room. On the screen, Alana spun around in that deep red silk dress, a garment I had never purchased for her, a color that signaled a passion she had long since denied me. The audio was crisp, capturing the sharp click of her heels and the low rumbling laughter of the man who followed her through the door. The courtroom went bone silent. Even the court reporter's fingers froze over her keys. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, but in my periphery I saw Alana's lawyer lean back, his face a mask of sudden panicked calculation. Alana herself had stopped breathing. She sat perfectly still, her eyes locked on the screen like a deer staring at the headlights of an oncoming semi-truck. "Is the coast clear?" Keegan's voice filled the room, sounding even more arrogant and invasive through the court's surround sound speakers. "He's stuck at the office until midnight." The digital, Alana replied, her voice dripping with a playfulness I hadn't heard in years. I watched the judge. She didn't look at the lawyers. She didn't look at me. She leaned forward, her elbows on the bench, her eyes narrowed as she watched my wife embrace a stranger in the house I paid for. When the video reached the moment where Alana called our daughter a brat and joked about my paranoia, a collective gasp rippled through the small gallery. It was a visceral, physical reaction from everyone in the room. The footage didn't stop at the living room. Rhodes had meticulously edited the clips to show the pattern: the weeks of Keegan lounging on the sofa, the two of them mocking my logistics career, and most damningly, the moments of cold neglect toward Juniper. The camera captured Alana's face as she stared at the hallway where our daughter was crying, her expression one of pure, unadulterated annoyance, before she turned up the volume on the television to drown out the sound of her own child's distress. "Stop it," Alana whispered. It was so low, I almost didn't hear it. "Your Honor." Her lawyer finally found his voice, though it cracked with desperation. This is a gross violation of privacy. This footage was obtained without consent in a private residence. It's inadmissible. Rhodes didn't even look at him. He remained standing calm and immovable. The device was installed by the primary homeowner and leaseholder for the security of his property and his minor child. Your Honor, there is no expectation of privacy when committing fraud and child neglect in a shared marital home. The judge raised a hand, silencing the room. The objection is noted for the record, but I will see the rest of the evidence. Sit down, counselor. The video played on. It showed Alana and Keegan sitting at the kitchen island, the very place where we used to eat breakfast as a family. They were looking at a tablet, the divorce filing. I'll ruin him before he even realizes the war has started. The digital, Alana said, her voice echoing with a chilling, calculated malice. I felt the weight of the last few months finally begin to lift, replaced by a cold, hard satisfaction. The gaslighting, the midnight drives to the safe house, the agonizing hours spent watching my life be dismantled through a pinhole lens, it was all leading to this moment of absolute, undeniable truth. I wasn't the unstable one. I wasn't the absentee father. I was the witness. As the clip ended, the screen went black, leaving the courtroom in a heavy, suffocating darkness before the overhead lights seemed to hum back to life. The silence that followed was louder than the video itself. Alana finally turned her head toward me. The mask of the grieving mother was gone, replaced by something jagged and ugly. Her eyes weren't filled with tears. They were filled with a frantic, cornered rage. She looked like she wanted to lung across the table and claw my eyes out, but she was pinned to her chair by the weight of the evidence. Mr. Brooks, the judge said, her voice sounding different now, softer, yet laced with a terrifying authority. She looked at me for the first time with genuine empathy. Is there more? There are over 40 hours of logged footage, Your Honor, Rhodes answered for me, including discussions of liquidating assets hidden from the court and further disparagement of the minor child. But for the purpose of this emergency hearing, we believe the petitioner's fitness as a primary caregiver has been clearly demonstrated. Alana's lawyer tried to speak, but the judge cut him off with a single sharp glance. She turned her attention to Alana. Mrs. Brooks, the judge began her words measured and cold. This court takes a very dim view of fabrication. You stood here under oath and described a husband who was a danger to his child. You described yourself as a devoted primary caregiver. The judge looked down at the documents on her bench, then back up at the screen. What I just saw was a woman who regards her daughter as a brat and an obstacle to her social life. I saw a woman who conspired to commit what appears to be significant financial fraud against her spouse. It's not what it looks like. Alana stammered, her voice thin and high. He drove me to it. He was never home. I was lonely. Being lonely does not grant you the right to neglect a 4-year-old or fabricate a psychological profile of your husband to win a legal battle. The judge snapped. The momentum of the room had shifted entirely. We were no longer discussing temporary arrangements. We were witnessing a total collapse. Rhodes leaned over and whispered, "She's finished. Look at her lawyer. He's already thinking about his malpractice insurance." Indeed, the man sitting next to Alana had pulled his chair a few inches away from her, his head down as he furiously scribbled notes. He knew the ideal mom brand was dead. The social media influenced the mommy blogger reputation, the house, the equity. It was all evaporating in the sterile air of Department 4. The judge tapped her pen on the desk, a rhythmic sound that felt like a countdown. In light of this evidence, I am vacating the previous emergency orders. Mr. Brooks, you are granted immediate temporary full custody of Juniper. Mrs. Brooks is to vacate the marital residence by 6 p.m. tonight. A small, sharp sob escaped Alana's throat, but it wasn't a sob of grief. It was the sound of a person who had lost her power. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice gaining strength. Mrs. Brooks will be allowed only supervised visitation to be held at a county-approved facility until a full psychological evaluation can be completed, and I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office to investigate the potential for perjury and child endangerment. Jubberr. The ignition roared to life, a low, steady vibration that felt like the first real heartbeat I'd had in months. I sat there for a moment in the parking lot, the air conditioning blasting cold air against my face, trying to wash away the stale, suffocating scent of the courtroom. In the rearview mirror, the grand marble columns of the courthouse looked like the bars of a cage I had finally escaped. I shifted the car into gear and pulled away, leaving Alana standing on those steps, a fading figure of a life that had been nothing but a beautifully painted lie. I drove straight to my sister's house, my mind racing faster than the wheels on the pavement. Every mile I put between myself and that courthouse felt like a layer of lead being stripped off my chest. When I pulled into her driveway, Juniper was already sitting on the porch swing, clutching a different, smaller doll. When she saw my car, she didn't just walk. She sprinted. "Daddy!" She screamed, her voice a piercing, joyful, jagged edge that sliced through the afternoon quiet. I caught her in midair, the impact of her small body against mine, nearly knocking the wind out of me. I buried my face in her shoulder, breathing in the scent of sun-warmed grass and laundry detergent. For the first time, there was no fear of a disrupted routine. No fear of an angry mother waiting in the shadows. There was just us. "We're going home, June," I whispered into her hair. "But just to get your things. We're going on a little adventure, a new place, just you and me." "And Mr. Buttons?" she asked, pulling back to look at me with wide, hopeful eyes. I looked over at the gym bag on the passenger seat. "Especially Mr. Buttons. He's a hero, June. He's going to get a special spot on the highest shelf of our new house." The process of moving back into that house for just 1 hour to pack her things was the hardest part of the day. The locks hadn't been changed yet. That was for me to do later, but the energy of the place was toxic. Alana had already been there and gone. She had cleared out her jewelry, her designer bags, and the red dress. The house looked like it had been robbed, not by a stranger, but by the very person who was supposed to protect it. I walked into the living room and looked at the mantel. The spot where the bear had sat was empty, just a light layer of dust marking the place where the truth had been recorded. I didn't feel the urge to linger. I packed 2 suitcases for Juniper, grabbed her favorite books, and took the framed photo of my parents from the hallway. I left everything else, the furniture, the expensive wine, the memories of a marriage built on shifting sand. She could have it all, or the bank could. I didn't want a single thread of that life touching my daughter's future. As we drove away from that neighborhood for the last time, I looked at Juniper in the back seat. She was staring out the window, watching the trees go by, a look of profound peace on her face that I hadn't seen in a year. She didn't ask about her mother. Not once. Children are more perceptive than we give them credit for. They know when the storm has passed, and they know who held the umbrella. That night, in a small, clean apartment overlooking the river, a temporary sanctuary Rhodes had helped me secure, I sat on the balcony while Juniper slept soundly in the next room. The world was quiet. No spicy cologne, no hidden whispers, no sound of a television being turned up to drown out a child's heart. I pulled out my phone and looked at the channel one last time. I saw the comments pouring in on the teaser I had posted earlier. People were shocked. They were angry. They were supportive. But most of all, they were curious. I can't believe she called her own kid a brat while the husband was at work, one person wrote. The teddy bear camera is legendary. Justice for the dad, wrote another. But then I saw the divide. Some people argued that I was cruel for filming her, that I should have just talked to her. Others said Alana was a victim of a boring marriage. It's a strange thing, isn't it? Even when the truth is captured in 4K, people will still find a way to justify the betrayal. I want to ask you, all of you who have stayed with me through this nightmare, do you think there's ever a right way to handle a betrayal this deep? Was I wrong to turn the house into a surveillance zone? Or was it the only way to save a child from a mother who had already checked out? Or let me know in the comments. I'm reading all of them. Your stories, your support. It's the only thing that kept me sane during those weeks in the dark. And if you haven't yet hit that subscribe button, this isn't just about drama. It's about a father rebuilding a life from the ashes. I'll be posting updates on our new journey and the final legal fallout for Alana and Keegan. You won't want to miss what the district attorney had to say about that footage. As I sat there, the moon reflecting off the dark water of the river, I realized that for years I had been an architect of logistics, making sure everything was in the right place at the right time. I had thought I failed because my family fell apart. But looking at the quiet door of Juniper's room, I realized I had just completed my most important delivery. I had delivered my daughter to safety. I picked up the worn-out teddy bear from the chair beside me. I looked at the glass eye, the one that had captured the red dress, the mocking laughter, and the plans for my ruin. I took a small piece of black tape and covered the lens. His job was done. He didn't need to be a witness anymore. He just needed to be a toy again. I leaned back and closed my eyes, listening to the steady, rhythmic sound of the river. It was a new sound, a clean sound. It was the sound of a tomorrow that belonged entirely to us. I finally let go of the tension in my shoulders, feeling the weight of the world settle into something manageable. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't just breathe, I lived.